Absolutely, Sally, and typically when we do reflect on a leader who's passed away, there are a few words which come to mind, and depending on which side of the political spectrum you are on, very different words when it comes to Robert Mugabe. Let's focus very quickly on the beginning of his political career. Of course, he was a liberation fighter. In fact, he was imprisoned for the better part of a decade between 1964 and 1974, and then rose really to the foreground of the negotiations. Remember those negotiations in 1979, which became known as the Lancaster House talks. When he became the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, he really was known as a champion of the poor. Of course, he implemented a system of free education, particularly at the primary school level. He was a teacher, by the way, so he did appreciate the value of education. Fast forward to 2000, and this is a key moment in Zimbabwe's history. We saw a series of land grabs, Mugabe really styling himself as a son of the soil, someone who believed that Zimbabwe belonged to Zimbabweans. Of course, that move did have a series of political and economic effects. One of the political effects, well, we saw the rise of Morgan Tsvangirai. Of course, this man was a thorn in the side of Robert Mugabe for a very long time. He formed the MDC, which was really the only real opposition to ZANU-PF at the polls over the last 20 years or so. Tsvangirai really staged a confrontation of sorts at the polls, politically speaking. In 2008, he in fact beat Robert Mugabe, securing 48% of the vote in the presidential election. But there was a series of victimization and intimidation, Sally, which unfolded in the wake of that, and Tsvangirai pulled out of the runoff election. We saw a lot of turmoil in the wake of that, several months unfolding. Thabo Mbeki having to step in and play a role in securing what was known as the GPA, really a deal which paved the way for a government of national unity. Of course, Mugabe's critics claimed that he was just stringing everyone along in order to entrench himself as the leader. Hyperinflation struck Zimbabwe not long after that. This was become known, Sally, as Mugabe money. Remember that $100 trillion note circulating in the economy. In fact, inflation climbed to around about 230 million%. That's right, 230 million% at one stage. And Zimbabwe had a jobless rate of 90%. The vast majority of people having to earn a living outside of the formal economy. And this is an important word as well, because Mugabe was frequently known as a dictator. And by November 2017, his time was up. The military rolling into the streets of Harare and effectively sending the message that Mugabe had to go. 9 months later, Emmerson Mnangagwa elected as Mugabe's successor. Of course, he did serve as his deputy president for a long time, and he does have a reputation, Sally, for being a rather wily politician. Of course, that nickname being the crocodile. Of course, it remains to be seen whether he can return Zimbabwe to the heights that it once reached, Sally. It was, of course, known as the breadbasket of Africa for a long time.
Yes, still massive challenges ahead for Zimbabwe. Thank you very much, Michael Marilia.